Welcome back to the weekly Trusted Visions podcast. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. It was a little crazy over here with friends on the lake and all that good stuff. So I'm glad to be back to work. Team, hope you guys had a great Memorial Day weekend. We kick off a new monthly series. As we've done in the past, we always do a monthly topic and break it into subtopics. And from our viewers and feedback we received to them, we're going to start this month off with talking about practice acquisitions and the importance of a succession plan. So we're going to break it into this week. We'll talk about the importance of a succession plan and how to set up a sound succession plan and finding a successor. And then the following week, we'll break it into being a buyer or a seller of a practice and how to set your practice up now for the future of selling it for the most that you can. So team, greatly appreciate you all being on here this week and having the entire Trusted Visions team together again. David, we're going to start with you. I've always been amazed throughout my 20 years in this industry of pretty much every advisor talks about a succession plan and says, hey, I should have one, but then they think they're invisible and never put one together or don't even know the steps to take to set up a succession plan. So let's start with you, David, of why is it important for an advisor to put together and have a sound succession plan?
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Jeremy. When you're looking at it, nobody wants to look at their own mortality and really take that into consideration on a daily basis. You know, as financial advisors, everybody's working with their clients to plan for the future or their what ifs in those particular situations. But when you look at it, and as bluntly as a lot of people have put it in years, you got to take a second and look back and say, what happens if I get hit by a bus on my way to the office today? What's going to happen to my practice? What's going to happen to my clients? What's going to happen with my family? You've got all of those issues you have to basically take into consideration. And it's absolutely a must for and I'll say this again, it's an absolute must for any independent advisor that has an established practice, period. It's no different from you as an individual. As soon as you start a family or you get married, you have to establish a will or a family trust or anything that goes along with it. But the will is what we call the minimum. That's your minimum expectations. And it's the same thing for having a succession plan. As a financial advisor with an established practice, you must have a succession plan in place. It doesn't have to be the most complex one out there. It can be very simple, but you must have one in place because it's going to give you control. It's going to basically put in place your ideas, your plans, and it's going to give you the control to basically what happens to your clients, what's going to happen with your family, what's going to happen with that individual book. If not, that's left in your broker-dealer's hands. It's left in your client's hands of what's going to take place. And a lot of clients nowadays will ask you, what's your plans if you decide to leave or exit the business, or if something happens to you, who's going to take care of me and my family and the financial plan that we established? So it can be very simple or extremely advanced. I won't take away some of the thunder from my other colleagues out there, but there's a lot of different ways you can structure it. Buy, sell agreements, you name it, a lot of opportunities out there. But by far, it gives you, your clients, and your family peace of mind. And that is exactly what you have to put in place. It has to be some kind of a plan of what's going to happen with your clients, what's going to happen with your book, and put that in place with your broker dealer or with another colleague out there. But it's a must for any established advisor.
Right. Great points, David. And I guess a couple of things that I would ask you would you say it's a fair statement? And this is the part that I've always found comical of advisors that don't have succession plans is a succession plan for an advisor in their practice is very similar to an advisor selling a client life insurance. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. It's basically taking the same concept. If you're selling life insurance to your clients and you don't have a succession plan, you're not practicing what you preach, because that's exactly what a succession plan does. When you're buying life insurance for your family to take care of them once you're gone, a lot of individuals even use, I've worked a lot on the life insurance side of the world, and life insurance is a huge part. And we'll talk a little bit about that going forward, but as part of a succession plan, or buying or selling a book, leveraging life insurance in those particular situations can be a huge key to basically making, not only taking care of your family, getting compensated for your book, and making sure everybody's taken care of on that side. So life insurance, absolutely. If you're selling life insurance to your clients to basically protect the risk, because that's really what it comes down to. It's the risk for your family and what's going to happen for their future. It's the same thing when it comes to your practice, your clients, and your family. You're basically going to protect them against the risk that goes along with something happens to you.
Right. Right.
And would you say, one last follow-up question before we move on to the next topic is, I know when we were all young and I used to race ATVs, I thought I was invisible, and so nobody could harm me in my 20s.
Right.
Is a succession plan just as important for someone either just starting out in a business or, in the early stages and younger as it is for those older advisors?
Absolutely. Getting started early, getting something in place. And like we said, it can be pretty simple. If you're just getting into the business, you can basically have a drafted agreement working with your broker dealer on an advisor that you know locally that will basically help you, that's part of that same broker dealer. A lot of the times if you're starting out, you'd want it to be somebody that's with your current broker dealer. It just makes it a little bit simpler. We'll talk about more complications later, but absolutely, it can be very simple if somebody's saying, hey, I'm going to be able to take care of your clients, make sure they're taken care of, so on and so forth. Probably not a lot of financial things that go in along with those numbers. But then as you get into the business and you become more and more established, it becomes more and more important every single year on what's going to happen with your clients, what's going to happen with your book, and what it's going to look like if something does happen to you. So it's extremely important.
Perfect. Appreciate that, David. So now let's move on to what we've discussed, the importance of a succession plan. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers and advisors are going to say, well, that's great, but how do I even establish a succession plan? And so I'm going to cover this portion of it, of a couple things or, thoughts when establishing a succession plan. Most broker dealers out there have a practice management team and has the experience of putting together succession plans. Some of our broker dealer partners, they even have a offset at their national conference where you can sit down and actually establish a succession plan right there. So that's where, as an advisor, if you don't have a succession plan, that's where I would start, is reach out to somebody within your broker dealer practice management team and establish a succession plan with them and understand the do's and don'ts. The other thing I would say is make sure, I'm sure the broker dealers are well versed at this, but for the protection, as David said, of your family, your clients, and the practice you've built, make sure that you have an attorney that's well versed in whether it's business contracts or succession planning, or even a consulting firm like ours, because you want to make sure the succession plan you have in place is bulletproof from the perspective of, should something happen to you, I mean, you're not going to be around to be able to argue the points, and your family's not going to have the insights to it. So make sure that whatever succession plan you have put in place, that you certainly consult with an attorney, consult with outside consulting firms like Trusted Visions that can walk you through what we've seen and do's and don'ts. So with that, Sean, I'm going to move over to you and really cover the things to consider when setting up a succession plan, the things that an advisor should consider when setting up a succession plan.
Sure. Well, there are many things I believe to consider when establishing a succession plan. There are a few that really stick out. And the first, and arguably the most important, in my opinion, is actually identifying a buyer. Keep in mind, a succession plan is not just a transactional event. A relationship and fit must be in place to ensure a successful transition of ownership. Advisors should start by having conversations with their existing networks. Now, if they have colleagues in the business, which I'm sure they do, you may want to start those conversations if you're interested in the succession plan and looking to sell, because the fit has to be there. If not, within your network, you definitely want to tap into your broker dealer. And as you mentioned, Jeremy, there are practice management units there that could get you in contact with advisors that could potentially be a fit. Once you establish, a potential fit, that's when the due diligence on the seller's behalf starts. You have to make sure that the advisor that's buying your practice has a similar business mind. Because at the end of the day, if this is going to be successful, your clients have to buy into it as well. Yes. So you want to make sure that the potential buyer is certainly a sound, business-minded professional. Then also a cultural fit. Just speaking from experience, I've seen where broker dealers have matched buyers and sellers, but the fit just wasn't there from a personality standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. It just wasn't there. And I've actually witnessed succession plans being executed when the fit wasn't there. Needless to say, the experience was not what was hoped for. So definitely identifying that buyer, taking time to do that, and it could take a few years to do so. It's not an easy process. It's almost as if the seller is interviewing, where it is an interview for a potential buyer, an investigation, so to speak. So you definitely want to spend some time there. Outside of identifying that buyer, once you have that, you want to spend some time evaluating your practice. You want to realistically identify what is the monetary value of it. You have to consider factors such as client demographics, the success and growth rate you've had over the past several years. And there are practice management departments that will help advisors with that, their respective broker dealers. If your broker dealer doesn't have one, there are outside sources or resources you can tap into. Some of the mistakes I've witnessed was not doing the things I just mentioned. I've witnessed advisors waiting too long and being forced to sell their practice because they didn't evaluate it early enough, overvaluing their practice, and some just shared just too much information. And some even went to the highest bidder, and that's never a good idea to tap into the highest bidder. So in summary, I believe identifying that buyer is first and foremost, and then getting a really good valuation of your practice. And that's just really to get the wheels turning before you get into the contractual obligations.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Sean. I mean, a couple of things that I guess I would ask for our viewers is, the other thing to really think about is every state's different. And some states, if your family or your spouse or your kids are going to get that monetary value, if you're setting up that success plan and something happens to you,
right.
In some occurrences, those people have to be licensed or licensed in some way to share in those revenues if it's going forward. So really understanding where, what the state requirements are, regulatory requirements, because a lot of people don't even know that. And
absolutely.
The last thing, at least I know my wife would want, is something happens to me and my financial advisor says, hey, you have to go get Series 7 license. She'd probably pull me out of my grave.
Right.
Now, one question I would have for you, Sean, is how important is that relationship and that trust with that successor? And the reason I ask you that is, and I've seen this in my career, is you bring in a succession plan, a successor, and then all of a sudden, and I don't want to steal too much of Deb's thunder on this, but all of a sudden you start introducing that he or she to your clients before anything happens, and they're trying to steal your clients. So how important is that relationship when you're considering a successor?
It is the most important, in my opinion. The most important, as I mentioned, is identifying that buyer. And you want to make sure that you administer your due diligence on your end. If I'm an advisor, I'm not introducing a prospective buyer to my clients until I've vetted it out up and down. I want to make sure that, there is no competition. I want to make sure that the relationship is intact. I want to have a vision that this buyer can really, take care of my clients before I even get into the process. And also, just as a protective, situation, I would definitely make sure that maybe I have something in writing to where that what you just mentioned can happen. And I'm going to give it some time. As I mentioned, you've got to have time to make this successful. So I would say, during your due diligence and vetting process, take as much time necessary. It may take a few years. And if that buyer is really interested in your book of business, they'll hang on for the long ride.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, having a non-compete or non-solicit or even
Absolutely.
an NDA in place is vital when, if you ever get to that point of introducing some of your clients to that successor before something happens to you. Sean, great points. I always love this topic. Deb, Last but not least, as we've talked about the importance of establishing a succession plan and how to establish one and things to consider, I think this is probably one of the most important portions of it is, who do you even consider as a successor? I mean, you get the succession plan put together, right, and then you're left with, okay, who should I even consider? So what advice would you give to a financial advisor when they're trying to find a successor, who they should or shouldn't consider?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeremy. This is a great topic. I think that my colleagues answered, and brought up some good points and already discussed it. But first and foremost, this is your legacy, right? So your business is your legacy. And when you think about that, in my experience, has seen some fantastic practices in picking a successor that is a family member, right? Whether it's a daughter, a son, a grandson, someone that, and to Sean's point, trust, right? I mean, what is the biggest thing that advisors, you would think this is something easy to do? It is not. It is not an easy thing to find somebody and hand at some point your clients basically over to them, right? A huge amount of trust. Number one thing, someone that has the same culture that you have, right? So again, if you're looking at a picture perfect world, to me, that would be finding a family member, because that person is going to be someone that you trust, you feel you have loyalty, right? So you're not worried about them taking your book of business. Not that we probably have not seen that happen, right. But the majority of the time, I think we're pretty safe to say a family member is not going to do that to you, right? So you've got the trust there. You've got someone that you can bring in, after they get out of college or whatever the case may be, and you're grooming them in your business, right? I mean, those are always the best type of succession plans when you've got that family member that you're grooming in there. They're knowing your clients. Also, there's a I'm not going to be able to say it. Commonality with you. Yeah, thank you. With your clients and a family member. So that to me would be, is an idea solid successor. Otherwise, it would be, and again, like you said, Jeremy, you've got your practice management teams in your broker dealer, or you find someone like us that you can have a discussion with and say, hey, here's who I'm looking for. Here's my culture. Here's my book of business. These are my values. All these things play into who you want to get as that successor, in my opinion. Got to be like-minded, right? Because you got to be bringing someone in that is going to communicate and deal with your clients and think like you, right? Because that's how you have, how you've built your business, right? I mean, so they've got to be like-minded, doing the same kind of business. I know I'm talking fast and all, because there's so much to go into this. The same kind of business, right? I mean, if I'm someone that does financial planning and, I'm not going to bring somebody in that's a stock jockey. Right. Not going to be the right fit, right? And finding someone that you can bring in that can spend a few years. Again, I think the more time you can be grooming and have somebody that you're introducing to your clients, the best thing. So, again, there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, but again, a solid successor, A, is going to be, a family member. B, would be finding someone that is the same as you, basically, right? Does the same sort of business. Obviously you're looking for somebody a little bit younger because you want them to take over when you decide to sell or leave the business or work 2 hours a week, whatever the case may be.
And so, Deb, great points there. I love, the passion that you and all of us have about this. The question for you would be, and I think Sean touched on this as well, is you both really touched on the trust of a successor. So what would you say, and I'm sure I know the answer to this, but is asking or offering price more important than the trust side of it, or is the trust side of it, is it worth an advisor taking less to have that trust side of it versus taking more and being uncertain?
Oh, absolutely, taking less and having the trust and the fit, most important. And I think as advisors are looking for that in my experience anyway, that definitely has overcompensated for the price, right? If they find that perfect fit and somebody that they feel they have that trust and would work well with their clients. Again, this is a legacy. Now, a lot of these advisors that have been doing this as long as we have, they're at that age. They've been doing this for a long time. They've got 30, 40-year relationships with these clients. And that's got to be number one.
Right.
Yeah, and then I guess a second follow-up question is, you said the more time you can give yourself, the better off you are to groom someone.
Right.
What advice would you give for those older advisors that, like you put it, have been in the industry for 30, 40 years and don't have that succession plan? Should they have a greater sense of urgency because they don't have as much of a runway?
Oh, absolutely, they should. And that's the problem. We've all kind of just felt like, well, we don't really need this and we're going to work forever. But at the end of the day, we've seen over the last few years, this is a huge push for broker dealers, the continuity planning, succession planning. And it is time to get on it. That's the bottom line, because you really do want to make sure that you've got, let's be real. I think a year is not enough time. But if, you're at that stage, again, even if you can find a year where you have enough time to make an introduction to your clients with this person, it's just going to be better for them and be better for, for the retention and ongoing. And I don't know if David or Sean have something to add to that, but.
And the only thing I would add is you've got to consider it affects everybody.
Right.
You as a financial advisor, anybody that you talk with, that you have a passion with, your family, your friends, your colleagues, anything that's connected to your practice, it's absolutely going to affect them. And even your broker dealer, your clearing firms, product sponsors, you got to think about every single aspect of your business it's going to affect. And when you're looking at the succession planning side of it. So you really holistically have got to look at everybody in your chain of what it's going to take. So it is that important that it affects every single aspect of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, viewers, I hope you enjoyed this. Should you have any questions or even just want to start with a consultation of, hey, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on succession, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Trusted Visions team at info@trustedvisions.com, or please comment on our LinkedIn page or private message us on our LinkedIn page. We'd be happy. Collectively, we have a century of experience to talk through it with you. As Deb said, I think for those advisors that haven't put together a succession plan, there shouldn't be a greater sense of urgency than now. So we look forward to, team, thank you for taking part in this. We look forward to next week's topic where we dive more into practice acquisitions. Have a great week and a great weekend, and we will see you next week.